Don't move. Lonely sheriff saved pregnant outlaw in labor after he caught something shocking behind. In the desolate plains of the Wild West, Sheriff Cole Walker, a man haunted by his past, stumbles upon a pregnant outlaw, bleeding and desperate, on the run from a dark secret. As he prepares to bring her to justice, a chilling discovery forces him to make an impossible choice. What lies behind her escape? And can he save her in time, before the shadows of the past catch up with them both? If you're ready for a gripping tale of redemption, courage, and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from. Let's dive into this unforgettable story together. The sun blazed mercilessly over the Colorado Territory. Sheriff Cole Walker urged his horse forward, the animal's hooves kicking up clouds of dust that seemed to hang in the still air like ghosts of the past. At 58, Cole had seen more than his share of outlaws, desperados, and broken dreams scattered across these unforgiving plains. His weathered hands gripped the reins tighter as he studied the tracks before him. 3 days he'd been following this trail. 3 days since the bank robbery in Millfield that had left 2 men dead and a town in mourning. The wanted poster in his saddlebag bore the image of a woman's Sarah McKenna, 26 years old, armed and dangerous. What it didn't mention was that she was 8 months pregnant. Cole had learned that particular detail from a witness who'd seen her fleeing town, her condition obvious even beneath the dusty coat she wore. It had given him pause then, and it troubled him still. In all his years wearing the badge, he'd never pursued a woman so close to giving birth. But the law was the law, and 2 good men were dead because of her actions. The tracks led him through a narrow canyon where the walls rose like cathedral spires on either side, their red stone faces carved by centuries of wind and rain. His horse's breathing echoed off the rocks, creating an eerie symphony that made Cole's skin crawl. He'd always hated this particular stretch of country. Too many places for an ambush, too many memories of things better left buried. As he emerged from the canyon's mouth, Cole spotted something that made him rein in his mount. There, perhaps a quarter-mile ahead, a figure stumbled across the open ground. Even at this distance, he could see the person was struggling, moving with the desperate, uneven gait of someone at the end of their rope. Cole touched his heels to his horse's flanks and closed the distance quickly. As he drew nearer, his suspicions were confirmed. It was her, Sarah McKenna, the woman whose face had been burned into his memory from the wanted poster. But seeing her now, in the flesh, was something altogether different. She was younger than he'd expected, with auburn hair that caught the sunlight like spun copper. Her dress was torn and stained with dust and something darker blood, he realized with a start. She clutched her swollen belly with one hand, while the other pressed against her lower back. And even from horseback, Cole could see the pain etched across her features. When she heard the approaching hoofbeats, Sarah turned, and Cole found himself looking into the most desperate pair of green eyes he'd ever seen. There was fear there, yes, but also something else, a fierce determination that spoke of a woman who would fight to her last breath for whatever it was she was protecting. "Sarah McKenna," Cole called out, his hand resting on the butt of his Colt .45. "You're under arrest for the murder of Deputy Tom Harrison and bank clerk William Hayes." Sarah's face went pale, but she didn't run. Perhaps she couldn't. Instead, she straightened as much as her condition would allow and faced him squarely. "Sheriff," she said, her voice carrying a slight Irish accent that softened the hard edges of the moment. "I suppose you've come a long way to find me." 3 days, Cole confirmed, dismounting but keeping his distance. "You led me quite a chase, Miss McKenna. But it's over now." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Over? Sheriff, I'm afraid this is just the beginning." She winced suddenly, doubling over as what was clearly a contraction gripped her. When she straightened again, there were tears in her eyes. "The baby. It's coming." Cole felt his world tilt slightly. He'd delivered foals and calves in his time, but a human baby. That was territory he'd never ventured into, especially not with a wanted criminal in the middle of nowhere. "How long?" he asked, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. "The pain started this morning," Sarah gasped. "They're getting closer together." Cole looked around at the desolate landscape, calculating distances in his head. The nearest town was Copper Creek, a full day's ride south. The nearest doctor was even farther. If this woman was truly in labor, they were in serious trouble. "There's an old line shack about 2 miles north," he said finally. "It used to belong to the Rocking M Ranch before they went under. It's not much, but it's shelter." Sarah studied his face, searching for something kindness perhaps, or at least the absence of cruelty. "You're not going to leave me here to die?" The question hit Cole harder than he'd expected. "No, ma'am. Whatever you've done. I won't leave a woman to give birth alone in the wilderness." As if summoned by his words, another contraction seized Sarah. This one's stronger than the last. She cried out, a sound that seemed to echo across the empty plains like a prayer or a curse. Cole found himself moving toward her without conscious thought, his lawman's instincts warring with something deeper, more human. "Can you ride?" he asked. Sarah nodded, though her face was white with pain. "I think so. For a little while longer." Cole helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. As they rode toward the distant line shack, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was crossing more than just physical ground. Something fundamental was shifting, though he couldn't yet put his finger on what it was. The sun continued its relentless journey across the sky, and with each passing mile, Cole Walker found himself wondering if he was riding toward justice or something else entirely. The line shack materialized out of the heat haze like a mirage, its weathered wooden walls and sagging roof a welcome sight against the endless expanse of prairie. Cole had been here once before, years ago, when he was tracking a cattle rustler who'd holed up in the abandoned structure. The memory brought a bitter taste to his mouth. That particular chase had ended badly, with more blood spilled than justice served. Sarah had grown increasingly quiet during the ride, her body tense against his as wave after wave of contractions gripped her. Cole could feel the dampness of sweat through her dress, could hear the way her breathing had become shallow and rapid. Whatever else she might be, outlaw, murderer, desperate woman on the run right now, she was simply someone in need of help. He dismounted first, then carefully helped Sarah down from the horse. Her legs nearly buckled as her feet touched the ground, and Cole found himself catching her, his arms encircling her swollen form. For a moment, they stood frozen like that, two strangers bound together by circumstance and necessity. Sarah whispered, and Cole was struck by the genuine gratitude in her voice. When was the last time someone had thanked him for anything? Most folks in his line of work saw him as either a necessary evil or an unwelcome reminder of their own mortality. The shack's door hung askew on rusted hinges, and Cole had to put his shoulder to it to get it open. The interior was about what he'd expected. A single room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, and a narrow cot pushed against one wall. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that streamed through gaps in the walls, and the air smelled of old wood and abandonment. "It's not the Ritz," Cole said, attempting levity, "but it'll keep the sun off us." Sarah managed a weak smile as she lowered herself onto the cot. "Sheriff, right now, this looks like a palace to me." Another contraction hit her, and she gripped the edge of the cot so hard her knuckles went white. How long do you think we have?" Cole had no idea. His experience with birthing was limited to animals, and even then, he'd always had a veterinarian or an experienced rancher to guide him. "I don't rightly know, Miss McKenna, but we'll figure it out as we go." He busied himself making the space as comfortable as possible, using his bedroll to cushion the hard cot, and starting a small fire in the fireplace despite the heat. The flames would provide light when darkness fell. He had a feeling they were going to need all the help they could get. As he worked, Cole found himself stealing glances at Sarah. She was younger than he'd first thought, probably no more than 24 or 25. Her face, when not contorted with pain, had a delicate beauty that spoke of better times and different circumstances. What had driven her to rob a bank? What desperation had led her to this moment, Sheriff? Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. "What's your name?" "Your Christian name, I mean, Cole," he said after a moment's hesitation. "Cole Walker. Cole." She tested the name on her lips. "It's a good name, strong." She paused as another contraction built, breathing through it with a kind of focus that suggested this wasn't her first experience with pain. "I want you to know something. Whatever you think you know about what happened in Millfield, it's not the whole truth." Cole's hand moved instinctively to his gun belt. "Are you saying you didn't rob that bank?" "No," Sarah said quietly. "I'm saying there's more to it than what you've been told." She met his eyes, and Cole saw something there that gave him pause. Not the shifty guilt of a cornered criminal, but the steady gaze of someone telling the truth. Those men who died, they weren't innocent victims. Before Cole could respond, Sarah cried out as the strongest contraction yet seized her. It's time. When it passed, she was breathing hard, and there was a new urgency in her movements. "Cole," she gasped, I think it's time." Cole felt his mouth go dry. Time for what, exactly? "The baby's coming. Now." For a moment Cole stood frozen, his mind reeling. He'd faced down armed desperados, survived shootouts and standoffs, tracked killers across hundreds of miles of hostile territory. But this helping a woman give birth was completely outside his experience. "What do I need to do?" he asked, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. Sarah was already working to position herself on the cot, her movements guided by instincts older than civilization. "Water," she said through gritted teeth. Clean water, if you can find it, and something clean to wrap the baby in. Cole nodded and set to work. There was a well behind the shack, and though the water was warm and tasted of minerals, it was clear. He used his spare shirt as a makeshift towel and tried to remember everything he'd ever heard about birthing, which wasn't much. As the afternoon wore on, Cole found himself drawn into the rhythm of Sarah's labor. He held her hand when the contractions came, spoke quietly to her during the brief respites between them, and gradually began to see her not as a criminal to be apprehended, but as a woman, fighting the most fundamental battle of all, bringing new life into the world. Tell me about yourself, Cole, Sarah said during one of the calmer moments. Are you married? Do you have children? The questions hit him like physical blows. No, he said quietly. No wife, no children. Just the badge and whatever justice I can manage to serve. That sounds lonely. Cole considered this. I suppose it is. But it's the life I chose. Or the life that chose you, Sarah observed. She studied his face in the firelight. You're a good man, Cole Walker. I can see it in your eyes. It's whatever brought you to this moment. Whatever choices led you here. You're a good man. Cole didn't know how to respond to that. Goodness was a luxury he'd long ago decided he couldn't afford. But something in Sarah's voice, in the way she looked at him, made him want to believe it might still be possible. As night began to fall and Sarah's labor intensified, Cole found himself praying to a God he'd stopped talking to years ago. Not for justice or vengeance or any of the things he usually asked for, but for something simpler and more profound. The safe delivery of a child who had done nothing wrong, regardless of the circumstances of its conception or the crimes of its mother. Outside, the wind began to pick up, rattling the loose boards of the shack and reminding them both that they were very much alone in a vast and unforgiving world. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls as Sarah's labor progressed through the night. Cole had lost track of time. His world narrowed to this single room and the woman who fought with quiet determination on the narrow cot. Between contractions, she told him her story, and with each revelation, Cole felt his understanding of the situation shift like sand beneath his feet. My husband's name was Michael, Sarah said, her voice soft but steady. Michael McKenna. He was a good man, Cole, a carpenter by trade, gentle as a lamb. She paused as another wave of pain washed over her, then continued. We came out here from Boston 3 years ago, looking for a fresh start. Michael had heard there was work in the mining towns, building houses for all the families moving west. Cole listened, his weathered hands holding hers as she spoke. There was something in her voice, a quality of truth that he'd learned to recognize over the years. It was different from the desperate lies of cornered criminals or the smooth deceptions of confidence men. This was the sound of someone unburdening herself of a terrible weight. We settled in Millfield because it seemed like a good place to raise a family, Sarah continued. Michael found work right away, and we rented a little house on Elm Street. I was so happy, Cole. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. What happened? Cole asked gently. Sarah's face darkened. Deputy Tom Harrison happened. And William Hayes. She spat the names like curses. They ran things in Millfield, Cole, not the sheriff. He was just a figurehead. It was Harrison and Hayes who really controlled the town. Cole frowned. He'd known Tom Harrison by reputation, a hard man, but supposedly honest. What kind of control? The kind that comes from fear and violence, Sarah said bitterly. They had their fingers in every business, took a cut from every transaction. Protection money, they called it. And if you didn't pay, ... double quotes, she trailed off, her hand moving protectively to her belly. They hurt your husband, Cole said. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. Michael tried to stand up to them. He organized some of the other businessmen, tried to get them to refuse to pay. He said we couldn't live in fear forever. Her voice broke. They killed him for it, Cole. Beat him to death in an alley behind the bank and made it look like a robbery gone wrong. Cole felt something cold settle in his stomach. When? 6 months ago. I was 3 months pregnant, alone in a town where the law was controlled by the men who murdered my husband. Sarah's eyes blazed with a fierce light. But I had something they didn't know about. Michael had been keeping records, names, dates, amounts. Documented everything they'd done, every crime they'd committed. The pieces were starting to fall into place in Cole's mind. The bank robbery ... wasn't a robbery at all, Sarah confirmed. I went there to get Michael's evidence. He'd hidden it in a safety deposit box, and I was the only one who knew where. Hayes caught me in the vault, and when he realized what I was after, ... double quotes, she shuddered. He pulled a gun on me, Cole. Said he was going to finish what they'd started with Michael, so you shot him, in self-defense. And when Harrison came running, gun drawn, ready to kill me to protect their secret, ... Sarah's voice was steady now, matter of fact. I shot him too. I took the evidence and ran, because I knew no one would believe. A pregnant widow against two respected lawmen. Who would take my word? Cole was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd told him. It changed everything, and nothing. Even if her story was true, she'd still killed two men. But the circumstances. Where's this evidence now? Sarah reached into her dress and pulled out a leather portfolio, its edges worn from handling. Right here. Michael's life's work. Proof of everything they did. She handed it to Cole. Look for yourself. Cole opened the portfolio and began to read by firelight. What he found made his blood run cold. Page after page of meticulous documentation. Businesses extorted, families threatened, competitors eliminated. And at the center of it all, Tom Harrison and William Hayes, using their badges as shields while they bled a town dry. My God, Cole whispered. This is enough to bring down half the territorial government. Now you understand why they killed Michael, Sarah said, and why they would have killed me too, if I'd given them the chance. Another contraction seized her then, stronger than any before, and Sarah cried out. When it passed, she was breathing hard, and there was a new urgency in her movements. Cole, she gasped, the baby, I can feel it. It's coming now. Cole set the portfolio aside and moved to help her, his mind still reeling from her revelations. Everything he'd believed about this chase, about his duty as a lawman, had been turned upside down. Sarah McKenna wasn't a cold-blooded killer. She was a woman who'd fought back against corruption and paid a terrible price for it. What do I need to do? He asked. Sarah guided him through the process, her voice growing weaker, but her instructions clear. Cole found himself marveling at her strength, her courage in the face of unimaginable pain and uncertainty. This woman had lost her husband, fled for her life, and was now giving birth in an abandoned shack with only a stranger for help, and still she fought on. I can see the head, Cole said, his voice filled with wonder. Sarah, I can see your baby. With one final tremendous effort, Sarah brought her child into the world. The baby's cry filled the small shack, a sound of pure life that seemed to chase away all the shadows and doubts that had plagued Cole for so long. Is it? Sarah asked weakly. A girl, Cole said, carefully lifting the tiny, perfect child. You have a daughter, Sarah. As he wrapped the baby in his clean shirt and placed her in Sarah's arms, Cole felt something shift inside him. This wasn't about law and order anymore. It wasn't about justice, as he'd always understood it. This was about protecting the innocent and standing up for what was right, even when the law itself had been corrupted. What will you name her? He asked softly. Sarah looked down at her daughter, tears of joy and exhaustion streaming down her face. Hope, she said without hesitation. Her name is Hope. Cole nodded, understanding flooding through him. Hope for a better future, for justice, for redemption. As he looked at mother and child in the firelight, Cole Walker made a decision that would change the course of all their lives. The evidence in that leather portfolio wasn't just Sarah's salvation. It was the key to cleaning up an entire territory, and Cole intended to use it. Dawn broke over the Colorado territory with a brilliance that seemed to mock the complexity of Cole's situation. Sarah slept fitfully on the cot, her newborn daughter nestled against her chest, both of them exhausted from the night's ordeal. Cole sat in the doorway of the line shack, watching the sun paint the landscape in shades of gold and amber, while his mind wrestled with the most difficult decision of his career. The leather portfolio lay open beside him, its contents spread across his lap like pieces of a puzzle that painted a picture of corruption so deep it reached into the very foundations of territorial law. Names he recognized, dates that corresponded to unsolved crimes, amounts that represented the systematic bleeding of an entire community. Michael McKenna had been thorough in his documentation, and his widow had paid a terrible price for preserving his work. Cole's badge felt heavy on his chest as he considered his options. By the letter of the law, Sarah McKenna was a fugitive who had killed two lawmen. It didn't matter that those lawmen were corrupt, didn't matter that she'd acted in self-defense. His duty was clear. Arrest her, bring her back to face trial, let the courts sort out the truth. But Cole had been wearing a badge long enough to know that justice and law weren't always the same thing. Sometimes they were enemies, and a man had to choose which master he would serve. A soft cry from inside the shack drew his attention. Baby Hope was awake, and Sarah was struggling to sit up, her movements slow and painful. Cole folded the documents carefully and went to help her. How are you feeling? He asked, offering her water from his canteen. Like I've been trampled by a herd of cattle, Sarah admitted with a weak smile. But alive. We're both alive, thanks to you. She looked down at her daughter, who was making small, hungry sounds. I don't know how to thank you, Cole. What you did last night, ... Any decent man would have done the same, Cole said. But Sarah shook her head. No, they wouldn't have. Most men would have seen a wanted criminal and nothing else. You saw a woman in need. She studied his face. You read Michael's evidence, didn't you? Cole nodded. Every word. Your husband was a brave man, Sarah, and a thorough one. Brave and foolish, Sarah said sadly. If he'd just kept his head down, paid their blood money like everyone else, he'd still be alive. And how many other good people would have suffered? How many other families would have been destroyed? Cole sat down on the edge of the cot. Your husband did the right thing, Sarah. It cost him his life, but he did the right thing. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then looked up at him with those green eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. What happens now, Cole? Are you going to arrest me? The question hung in the air between them like smoke from a dying fire. Cole had been asking himself the same thing since dawn, and he still didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had two answers, and they were tearing him apart. I've been thinking about that, he said finally, and I keep coming back to something my father told me when I first pinned on this badge. He said that sometimes a man has to choose between being a good lawman and being a good man. He said the trick was knowing when those two things weren't the same. And what do you think now? Sarah asked softly. Cole was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sound of the wind outside and the gentle breathing of the baby. I think your husband's evidence needs to see the light of day. I think the people of Millfield deserve to know the truth about the men who terrorized them. And I think you and your daughter deserve a chance at the life Michael wanted for. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. What are you saying? I'm saying that sometimes justice has to come from outside the law, Cole said. I'm saying that Tom Harrison and William Hayes got what they deserved, and the world is a better place without them. He reached into his vest and pulled out his badge, staring at it in the morning light. I'm saying that I'm going to help you disappear, Sarah McKenna. You and Little Hope are going to start over somewhere far from here, where no one knows your name or your story. Cole, you can't, Sarah protested. Your career, your reputation, they'll destroy you if they find out. Cole smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine. Let them try. I've been a lawman for 30 years, Sarah. I've seen enough corruption, enough injustice, enough good people ground down by bad systems to last several lifetimes. Maybe it's time I did something that actually mattered. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the vast expanse of territory that stretched to the horizon. There's a town called Cedar Falls, about 200 miles north of here. It's growing fast, lots of opportunities for someone willing to work hard. The sheriff there is an old friend of mine, honest as the day is long. I'll write you a letter of introduction. Tell him you're a widow looking for a fresh start. And the evidence goes to the territorial governor, along with a full report of what really happened in Millfield. Your husband's work won't be in vain, Sarah. The truth will come out, and the people responsible will face justice. Sarah was crying openly now, clutching her daughter close. Why would you risk everything for us? Cole turned back to her, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there, peace. Perhaps, or maybe just the absence of the haunted look that had shadowed him since she'd first seen him. Because 30 years ago, I had a wife and a daughter of mine, and when they needed someone to stand up for them, to protect them from the corruption and violence that was eating our town alive, no one did. The good men stayed silent, and the bad men won. He sat back down beside her, his voice growing quiet. They died, Sarah. My wife and daughter died because I was too much of a coward to do what was right. I've been carrying that guilt ever since, trying to make up for it by enforcing a law that doesn't always serve justice. He reached out and gently touched baby Hope's tiny hand. Maybe this is my chance to finally get it right. Sarah reached out and took his weathered hand in hers. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving us a chance. Cole nodded, then stood up and began gathering his things. We need to get moving. I'll take you as far as the crossroads, then you'll head north while I go back to clean up this mess. Can you travel? Sarah tested her strength, sitting up straighter. I can do whatever I have to do to protect my daughter. As they prepared to leave the line shack that had sheltered them through the night, Cole felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. Not just for Sarah and her daughter, but for himself. Maybe it wasn't too late for redemption after all. The crossroads appeared in the distance like a symbol of destiny itself, two dusty paths intersecting in the middle of nowhere, one leading north toward hope and new beginnings, the other south toward the reckoning that awaited Cole and Millfield. They had ridden together for most of the morning, Sarah cradling baby Hope while Cole's horse carried them steadily across the rolling prairie. The journey had been largely silent, both of them lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. Sarah seemed stronger than Cole had expected, her body recovering from childbirth with the resilience of youth and determination. Baby Hope had slept peacefully for most of the ride, as if sensing that her survival depended on staying quiet. As they approached the crossroads, Cole felt the weight of finality settling over him. This was where their paths would diverge, where Sarah McKenna would disappear forever and become someone new, while he returned to face whatever consequences awaited him. "There's a supply station about 10 miles north," Cole said, pointing down the dusty track that led away from everything Sarah had ever known. "Old Pete Garrison runs it. Good man. Asks no questions. Tell him Cole Walker sent you, and he'll see you get what you need for the journey to Cedar Falls." Sarah nodded, but Cole could see the fear in her eyes. "What if someone recognizes me? What if word gets out?" "It won't," Cole said, with more confidence than he felt. "You're just another widow heading north to start over. There are dozens of women doing the same thing every day." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small leather pouch. "This should be enough to get you settled. Maybe rent a room and buy some supplies until you can find work." Sarah stared at the pouch in amazement. "Cole, I can't take your money. It's not much," Cole said gruffly, "and I won't be needing it where I'm going." He helped her down from the horse, then carefully transferred baby Hope to her arms. "There's something else." He pulled out a folded piece of paper, the letter of introduction he'd written by firelight that morning. "Give this to Sheriff Morrison in Cedar Falls. Tell him you're Mary O'Brien. That's your new name now, Sarah. Mary O'Brien, widow from back east. Looking for a fresh start. Sarah." Now Mary took the letter with trembling hands. "What about you? What will you tell them when you get back?" Cole had been thinking about that question all morning. The truth, mostly. That I tracked you to the line shack. That you went into labor. That the baby came during the night. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "And that when morning came, you were gone. Disappeared like smoke, taking your secrets with you. They'll know you're lying. Maybe. But they won't be able to prove it." Cole's smile was grim. "I've been bending the truth in service of justice for longer than you've been alive, Mary. I know how to make a story stick." They stood together at the crossroads, the morning sun climbing higher in the sky, and Cole felt the peculiar sensation of watching his old life end and something new begin. He'd spent 30 years trying to atone for his failures, and now, finally, he'd found a way to do something that truly mattered. "I'll never forget what you've done for us," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Never. Just live a good life," Cole replied. "Raise that little girl to be strong and honest like her father was. That's all the thanks I need." Baby Hope chose that moment to wake up, her tiny eyes opening to take in the world around her. She looked up at Cole with the unfocused gaze of the newborn, and he felt something twist in his chest, a pain and a joy so intermingled he couldn't tell where. One ended, and the other began. "She's going to be something special," he said softly. "I can see it in her eyes." "She's going to be free," Sarah said fiercely. "Free to choose her own path, free from the shadows of the past. That's what Michael wanted, and that's what you've given us." Cole mounted his horse and looked down at the woman and child who had changed everything for him. "You head north now, and don't look back. Whatever happens, don't look back." Sarah nodded, clutching her daughter close. "What about you, Cole? What will you do after you've finished in Millfield?" Cole considered the question. He'd been so focused on getting Sarah to safety and ensuring that Michael McKenna's evidence saw the light of day that he hadn't really thought about his own future. "I suppose I'll keep wearing the badge until they take it away from me. There's still good work to be done, still people who need protecting, and if they do take it away..." Cole's smile was surprisingly peaceful. "Then maybe I'll head north myself. Here Cedar Falls is a nice place to settle down." With that, he turned his horse south and began the long ride back to Millfield, back to face whatever justice awaited him. Behind him, Sarah, now Mary O'Brien, gathered her courage and began walking north, her daughter in her arms, and hope in her heart. As the distance between them grew, Cole found himself thinking about the strange turns life could take. 3 days ago, he'd been a lonely sheriff pursuing a wanted criminal. Now he was a man who'd helped deliver new life into the world and given a family the chance at freedom his own had never had. The sun climbed higher, and the crossroads disappeared behind him, but Cole Walker rode on with a lightness in his heart he hadn't felt in 30 years. Whatever came next, he'd finally done something right. He'd chosen justice over law, compassion over duty, and hope over despair, and for the first time in decades that felt like enough. The town of Millfield appeared on the horizon like a mirage of civilization in the vast wilderness. Its church spire and water tower rising above a collection of wooden buildings that seemed to huddle together for protection against the endless sky. Cole had been riding hard for 2 days, pushing his horse to its limits in his urgency to return and set his plan in motion. The leather portfolio containing Michael McKenna's evidence rode securely in his saddlebag, its contents burning in his mind like a brand. As he rode down Main Street, Cole noticed the subtle signs of a community living in fear. Shop owners glanced nervously at strangers. Conversations stopped when unfamiliar faces appeared, and there was a general air of tension that hung over the town like smoke from a distant fire. This was what corruption looked like when it took root, not just the obvious crimes, but the slow poisoning of trust and hope that left everyone looking over their shoulders. The sheriff's office sat at the corner of Main and Oak, a modest building that had seen better days. Cole tied his horse to the hitching post and took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Inside, he found Sheriff Ben Crawford hunched over his desk, looking older than his 55 years and worn down by burdens Cole was only beginning to understand. "Cole," Crawford looked up in surprise. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon. Did you catch up with the McKenna woman?" Cole settled into the chair across from Crawford's desk, noting the way the other man's eyes darted nervously around the room. "I found her, Ben, but the story's more complicated than we thought." Crawford's face went pale. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering directly, Cole pulled out the leather portfolio and placed it on the desk between them. "Before I tell you what happened, I think you need to see this. It's evidence that Michael McKenna compiled before his death. Evidence about what was really happening in this town." Crawford stared at the portfolio as if it were a snake coiled to strike. "Cole, I don't think. Open it, Ben." With trembling hands, Crawford opened the portfolio and began to read. Cole watched the other man's face as the truth unfolded before him. The documented extortion, the systematic corruption, the web of fear and violence that Harrison and Hayes had woven through the community. With each page, Crawford seemed to shrink further into himself. "My God," Crawford whispered finally. "I knew something was wrong, but this is worse than I ever imagined." "You knew?" Cole's voice was sharp. Crawford looked up, his eyes filled with shame. "I suspected. There were things that didn't add up, complaints that disappeared, witnesses who suddenly changed their stories. But Harrison and Hayes, they had connections, Cole. People in the territorial government, judges, politicians. I was just a small-town sheriff trying to keep the peace, while they murdered Michael McKenna for trying to expose the truth. I didn't know." Crawford's voice cracked. "I swear to you, Cole, I didn't know they'd killed him. I thought it was just a robbery gone wrong, like they said." Cole studied the other man's face and saw genuine anguish there. Crawford wasn't evil, just weak, a man who'd chosen the easy path of willful blindness rather than face an uncomfortable truth. It was a choice Cole understood all too well. "What happened to the McKenna woman?" Crawford asked quietly. Cole had rehearsed this moment during his long ride back to town. "I tracked her to an old line shack north. She was in labor when I found her gave birth during the night. When I woke up the next morning, she was gone. Vanished without a trace." Crawford's eyes narrowed. "You let her escape?" "I let a woman recover from childbirth before I tried to move her," Cole said even. "By the time I was ready to transport her back here, she'd disappeared. Could have gone in any direction." It wasn't exactly a lie, Cole told himself. Sarah had disappeared, and she could have gone in any direction. The fact that he'd helped her choose which direction was a detail Crawford didn't need to know. "The evidence changes everything, Ben," Cole continued. "Harrison and Hayes weren't lawmen. They were criminals with badges. Sarah McKenna didn't commit murder. She defended herself against corrupt officers who were trying to silence her." Crawford nodded slowly. "What do you want me to do?" "Send this evidence to the territorial governor. Demand a full investigation. Clean house, Ben. Give this town a chance to heal. And if the investigation reaches higher up, if there are people in the territorial government who were involved." Cole's smile was grim. "Then we follow the evidence wherever it leads. That's what real lawmen do." Over the next several hours, Cole and Crawford worked together to compile a comprehensive report of the corruption that had plagued Millfield. They interviewed witnesses who had been too afraid to speak before, gathered additional evidence, and began the process of unraveling the network of fear and violence that Harrison and Hayes had created. As word spread through the town that the truth was finally coming out, Cole saw something remarkable happen. People began to emerge from their shells of fear, sharing stories they'd kept hidden for years, offering testimony about crimes they'd witnessed but been too terrified to report. It was like watching a community come back to life. That evening, as Cole sat in the hotel restaurant enjoying his first real meal in days, a young woman approached his table. She was perhaps 25, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that reminded him of someone. "Sheriff Walker. Her name's Emma Hayes." "I'm William Hayes' daughter." Cole tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun, but the woman raised her hands peacefully. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly. "I just wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" Emma sat down across from him, her eyes filled with tears. "My father was a monster, Sheriff Walker. I've known it for years, but I was too afraid to speak up. He controlled everything in my life, who I could see, where I could go, what I could say. When I heard he was dead, I felt ... double quotes. She paused, searching for the right words. I felt free for the first time in my adult life. Cole studied her face, seeing the genuine relief there. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Hayes, but no, Emma interrupted. Don't be sorry. The world is a better place without him. And now, thanks to you and that evidence, maybe this town can finally heal. She reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. Thank you for having the courage to do what was right. As Emma left the restaurant, Cole reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. 3 days ago, he'd been a man haunted by his failures, carrying 30 years of guilt and regret. Now he was someone who'd helped deliver new life into the world, given a family the chance at freedom, and exposed a network of corruption that had poisoned an entire community. The badge on his chest felt different now, not like a burden but like a tool for justice. Real justice. Not the hollow enforcement of laws that serve the corrupt and powerful. Outside, the sun was setting over Millfield, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve justice and protect the innocent. But tonight, Cole Walker was content to sit in the gathering darkness and savor the knowledge that sometimes, even after 30 years of failure, a man could still find a way to do the right thing. 6 months later, the letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by the weekly mail coach that connected the scattered towns of the Colorado Territory. Sheriff Cole Walker sat in his office, reading the carefully penned words by the light of the autumn sun streaming through his window. Dear Cole, I hope this letter finds you well. Hope and I are settled in Cedar Falls now, and I wanted you to know how grateful we are for the new life you gave us. Sheriff Morrison was as kind as you promised he would be. He helped me find work at the general store, and I've rented a small house on Maple Street. It's not much, but it's ours, and for the first time since Michael died, I feel safe. Hope is growing so fast. She's 6 months old now, and she has the most beautiful smile. Sometimes I catch her looking at me with such intelligence in her eyes, and I think she knows somehow that her life began with an act of courage and kindness. I've heard news of what happened in Millfield, the territorial investigation, the arrests, the trials. You did it, Cole. You brought justice to a town that had forgotten what it looked like. Michael would be so proud. I know you probably don't want thanks, but I'm going to give them it. You saved us, Cole. Not just our lives, but our future. Hope will grow up free because of what you did, and I will never forget. Your friend always, Mary O'Brien. P.S. There's a teaching position opening up at the school here next year. The pay isn't much, but it would allow me to help shape young minds. I think I'd like that. Cole folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer next to the handful of others that had arrived over the past months. Each one brought news of Sarah's Mary's new life, and each one filled him with a quiet satisfaction that was worth more than any commendation or... The territorial investigation had indeed been thorough. The evidence that Michael McKenna had so carefully compiled had led to the arrest of 12 officials, including 2 judges and a territorial administrator. The network of corruption that had stretched across 3 counties was finally being dismantled, piece by piece. Cole's role in exposing the truth had made him something of a hero in the territory, though he was uncomfortable with the attention. He'd simply done what any decent lawman should do, followed the evidence and served justice. The fact that it had taken courage didn't make it special in his mind. It just made it necessary. A knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Ben Crawford entered, looking healthier than he had in months. The weight of complicity had been lifted from his shoulders, and he'd thrown himself into the work of rebuilding trust in Millfield's law enforcement. "Cole, there's someone here to see you." Behind Crawford stood a man Cole didn't recognize, all well-dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Sheriff Walker. "My name is James Morrison. I'm the Territorial Governor's Special Investigator." Cole stood and shook the man's hand. "What can I do for you, Mr. Morrison?" "Actually, it's what I can do for you," Morrison said with a smile. "The governor has been following your work on the corruption case, and he's impressed. Very impressed. He'd like to offer you a position as a territorial marshal." Cole blinked in surprise. "A marshal?" "It would mean a significant increase in pay and authority," Morrison continued. "You'd be responsible for investigating corruption and major crimes across the entire territory, based on what you've accomplished here. The governor believes you're exactly the kind of man we need." Cole was quiet for a moment, considering the offer. 6 months ago, he would have jumped at the chance for such recognition, such an opportunity to serve justice on a larger scale. But now, "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Morrison. I truly do. But I think I'll stay where I am." Morrison looked surprised. "Sheriff Walker, this is a rare opportunity. The position comes with considerable prestige, and I'm sure it's a fine position for the right man. Cole interrupted gently. But I've found my place here, and this town needs someone who understands what it's been through. Someone committed to making sure nothing like this ever happens again. Morrison studied Cole's face, then nodded slowly. I understand. The offer will remain open if you change your mind. After Morrison left, Crawford turned to Cole with amazement. A territorial marshal, Cole. That's the kind of position most lawmen dream about. Maybe, Cole said, but dreams change. What I want now is to help this town heal, to make sure that people here never have to live in fear again. That evening, Cole walked through the streets of Millfield, noting the changes that had taken place over the past months. Shop owners no longer looked nervously at strangers. Children played in the streets without their parents hovering anxiously nearby. There was laughter coming from the saloon, and the church bells rang with a joy that hadn't been heard in years. At the cemetery on the hill overlooking town, Cole stopped at a simple grave marker that read, Michael McKenna, beloved husband and father. Someone had left fresh flowers, probably Emma Hayes, who had become something of a guardian angel for the grave since her father's death. Your wife and daughter are safe, Michael, Cole said quietly. They're building a new life just like you wanted, and your evidence, it changed everything. The truth came out, just like you hoped it would. A gentle breeze stirred the flowers on the grave, and Cole took it as a sign of approval. He'd carried the guilt of his own family's death for 30 years, but helping Sarah and baby Hope had finally given him a measure of peace. He couldn't bring back his own wife and daughter, but he'd saved someone else's family, and that was enough. As he walked back toward town, Cole thought about the future. There would be other challenges, other opportunities to serve justice and protect the innocent, but he would face them here, in this place where he'd finally learned the difference between enforcing the law and serving justice. The sun was setting over Millfield, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. In the distance, a train whistle echoed across the prairie, carrying news and people and possibilities to all the scattered communities of the territory. It was the sound of progress, of hope, of a future being built one day at a time. Cole Walker, sheriff of Millfield, walked home through streets that were finally safe, carrying in his heart the knowledge that sometimes, even after a lifetime of mistakes, a man could still find a way to make things right. And in a small house on Maple Street in Cedar Falls, a young woman named Mary O'Brien tucked her daughter into bed and whispered a prayer of gratitude for the lonely sheriff who had given them both a chance at tomorrow. 5 years later, the autumn of 1885 brought an early frost to the Colorado Territory, turning the aspen leaves to gold and painting the morning air with the crisp promise of winter. In the town of Millfield, Sheriff Cole Walker stood on the porch of his office, watching the daily bustle of a community that had truly come alive. The changes were remarkable. Where once there had been empty storefronts and fearful faces, now there were thriving businesses and children playing in the streets. The railroad had finally come through, bringing with it new families, new opportunities, and the kind of prosperity that came from honest work rather than extortion and fear. Cole was 63 now, his hair completely gray, and his face lined with the accumulated wisdom of a life fully lived. He'd turned down 3 more offers for territorial positions, content to serve the community that had become his true home. The badge on his chest was the same one he'd worn for 30 years, but it meant something different now. Not just authority, but responsibility, service, and the hard-won knowledge that justice was worth fighting for. A familiar sound drew his attention, the laughter of children coming from the schoolhouse down the street. Among those voices, he knew, was that of young Hope McKenna, now 5 years old, and as bright as her mother had promised she would be. Sarah Mary O'Brien had indeed become a teacher, and her letters spoke of a life filled with purpose and joy. Sheriff Walker? Cole turned to see a young man approaching, perhaps 25 years old, with the eager look of someone just starting out in life. He wore a deputy's badge that gleamed in the morning sun. "What is it, Deputy Harrison?" Cole asked. Young man Tom Harrison's nephew, who had come to Millfield seeking to redeem his family's name through honest service, held up a telegram. "This just came in from Cedar Falls. Thought you'd want to see it right away." Cole took the telegram and read it quickly, a smile spreading across his weathered face. "Cole, Hope started school today. Teacher says she is the brightest student she has ever seen. Asked her what she wants to be when she grows up. She said a sheriff, like the man who saved her mama. Thought you should know." Mary Cole folded the telegram carefully, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the autumn sun. 5 years ago, he'd helped deliver that little girl into the world, and now she was dreaming of following in his footsteps. The thought filled him with a pride he'd never expected to feel. "Good news, Sheriff," Deputy Harrison asked. "The best kind," Cole replied. "The kind that reminds you why we do this job." As the day progressed, Cole found himself thinking about legacy, not the kind that came from headlines or commendations, but the quiet kind that lived on in the lives you touched and the choices you made when no one was watching. He'd spent 30 years trying to atone for his failures, and in the end, redemption had come not from grand gestures, but from a simple act of human kindness in a moment of desperate need. That evening, as he did every Tuesday, Cole sat down to write his weekly letter to Mary O'Brien. He told her about the changes in Millfield, about the new families moving in, and the old fears finally fading away. He told her about Deputy Harrison, who was turning out to be everything his uncle should have been, and he told her how proud he was to hear about Hope's dreams. "She has her father's courage and her mother's heart," he wrote. "Whatever she chooses to become, she'll make a difference in this world. You've raised her well, Mary. Michael would be proud." As he sealed the letter, Cole reflected on the strange turns life could take. He'd started as a young man full of ideals, lost his way in grief and guilt, and found redemption in the most unlikely of circumstances. The lonely sheriff who had once seen only duty and law had learned to see justice and compassion. Outside his window, the lights of Millfield twinkled like stars against the gathering darkness. Families sat down to dinner in homes that were finally safe. Children played games without fear. Shopkeepers locked their doors knowing they wouldn't wake to broken windows or threats. It was the kind of peace that could only come from justice truly served. Cole walked to his desk and opened the bottom drawer, pulling out a small wooden box he'd carved himself. Inside, carefully preserved, were all of Mary's letters from the past 5 years, each one a testament to the life he'd helped save, the future he'd helped secure. He added the telegram to the collection, then closed the box gently. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve and protect. There would always be those who sought to prey on the innocent, those who confused power with justice. But tonight, Cole Walker was content in the knowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, one person could make all the difference. He extinguished the lamp and stepped out onto the porch one last time, breathing in the crisp autumn air. Somewhere to the north, in a small house on Maple Street in Cedar Falls, a little girl named Hope was probably being tucked into bed, dreaming of wearing a badge and protecting people just like the man who had saved her mother. The circle was complete. Justice had been served, not in a courtroom or at the end of a rope, but in the quiet moments when good people chose to do what was right, regardless of the cost. And in that choice, in that moment of courage and compassion, a legacy was born that would echo through generations. Cole Walker, sheriff of Millfield, walked inside and closed the door, carrying with him the peace that comes only to those who have truly found their way home.